Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Hare Krishna. Good morning.
Hare Krishna.
Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 17, entitled Maharaj Prithu Becomes Angry at the Earth. And we're on text 26. Pumanyo Sheduta Kliba
Pumanyo Shiduta Kliba
Atma Sambhavano Dhamma
Atma Sambhavano Dhamma
Bhuteshu Niranu Krosho
Bhuteshu Niranukrosho
Nripanam Tadvadho Vadaha
Nripanam Tatvado Vadaha
Pumanyo Shedita Kliba
Pumanyo Shiduta Kliba
Atma Sambhavano Dhamma
Atma Sambhavano Dhamma
Bhuteshu Niranu Krosho
Bhuteshu Niranukrosho
Nripanam Tadvadho Vadaha
Nripanam Tatvado Vadaha
Pumanya Sheduta Kliba
Pumanyoshit Utakliba
Atma Sambhavano Dhammaha
Atma Sambhavano Damaha
Bhuteshu Niranu Krosho
Bhuteshu Niranukrosho
Nripanam Tadvado Vadaha.
Nripanam Tadvato Vadaha
Synonyms: Puman,
Puman,
a man;
a man.
Yoshit,
Yoshit,
a woman;
a woman.
Uta,
Uta,
also;
also.
Klibaha,
Klibaha,
a eunuch;
a eunuch.
Atma Sambhavanaha,
Atma Sambhavanaha,
interested in self-maintenance;
interested in self-maintenance.
Adhamaha,
Adamaha,
lowest of humankind;
lowest of humankind.
Bhuteshu,
Bhuteshu,
to other living entities;
to other living entities.
Nuranu Kroshaha,
Niranukroshaha,
without compassion;
without compassion.
Nripanam,
Nripanam,
for the kings;
for the kings.
Tat,
Tat,
of him;
of him.
Vadaha,
Vadaha,
killing;
killing.
Avadaha,
Avadaha,
not killing.
not killing.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
Translation: any cruel person, be he a man, woman, or impotent eunuch, who is only interested in his personal maintenance and has no compassion for other living entities, may be killed by the king. Such killing can never be considered actual killing. Purport: the planet Earth is actually a woman in her constitutional form, and as such, she needs to be protected by the king. Prithu Maharaj argues, however, that if a citizen within the state, be he man, woman, or eunuch, is not compassionate upon his fellow men, he or she may be killed by the king, and such killing is never to be considered actual killing. As far as the field of spiritual activities is concerned, when a devotee is self-satisfied and does not preach the glories of Krishna, he is not considered a first-class devotee. A devotee who tries to preach, who has compassion upon innocent persons who have no knowledge of Krishna, is a superior devotee. In his prayer to the Lord, Prahlad Maharaj said that he was not personally interested in liberation from this material world. Rather, he did not wish to be liberated from this material condition until all fallen souls were delivered. Even in the material field, if a person is not interested in others' welfare, he should be considered to be condemned by the personality of Godhead or his incarnation, like Prithu Maharaj. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam. Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. First ask and beg the blessings of the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis that I may be able to speak properly on our Gaudiya Vaishnav conclusions given to us by Srila Prabhupada and Vaishnavacharyas. Today's verse and purport is quite interesting, to say the least. It's very kind of intense what's being stated. So any cruel person, be he man, woman, or impotent eunuch. So here we have three different genders: man, woman, and eunuch. So eunuch, especially at that time, was a man who was dressing as a woman and would be engaged in so many different ways. And even politicians in the previous days would utilize eunuchs to be spies for them. So men who were dressed as women, and they would be very much engaged in kind of like womanly activities, even sometimes taking care of queens or princesses as a maidservant. And so they would actually, one of their main businesses was to protect women. So it's very interesting how we have Srimad Bhagavatam pointing out man, woman, and eunuch, and how any cruel person, here the term Atma Sambhavana, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur actually states this as somebody who's mad with the false ego and who has no mercy, no compassion. Right? Here Srila Prabhupada says, has no compassion for other living entities. So whether they're man, woman, eunuch, whoever they are, if they're completely mad with the ego and have no mercy and compassion for others, they may be killed by the king, and such killing is never to be considered actual killing. And Srila Prabhupada's purport is kind of split into two. In the very beginning, he talks about this point. And the second part of the purport, he talks about those who are engaged in spiritual life and what mercy and compassion means for those engaged in spiritual activities. So if we take the first part of the purport in the verse, in this day and age, right, people are, when you bring up the term capital punishment, there's a lot of pushback, and we can see how that there's people who, just recently there were some stories that there were some people on death row. They were going to be killed by the state, and there's actually evidence that shows that they were innocent. And even now we hear of stories about how people were wrongly punished, wrongly killed for crimes that they did not commit. That later on what happens is evidence comes out, because we have better technology now to, look at DNA and actual crimes and stuff, certain evidence comes to light that people were wrongly put to death. So, and we see how even politicians were using capital punishment as a way to easily please the population, to get rid of any kind of fears and to show that they had, strong control over crime and the population of the state. So in this day and age, to put such control in the hands of politicians to kill people, a lot of times there's very big mistakes. And so this is why, among different reasons, capital punishment is very much frowned upon, and rightly so. How I was just listening to Srila Prabhupada last night, talking about how, to just cut through the illusion of it all, that most of the people in this world are living in ignorance and passion. And those people elect people who are also in ignorant and passion. They just happen to be bigger people, and they put them into office. And those people who are in ignorance and passion are making decisions for the rest of the people in ignorant and passion. And we get a very unstable situation within this material world, where there's a lot of distrust and there's a lot of mistakes happening. So in the time of Maharaj Prithu, in the time of the great kings, we've talked about this so many times before, on how everything that the government did was taken into account for the happiness of the people. And Srila Prabhupada, last night when I was listening to this, he was saying that in a proper government, there would be no sinful activities, which means there would be no disease, there would be no unhappiness, there'd be no even natural disasters, right? And he points out how all of these kleshas, all of these disturbances within the material world, is due to the sinful activities of the living entities on this planet. And we talked about this last week in terms of meat eating and so many other sinful activities that happen, that there's reactions for all of this happening. So, and planet Earth is actually woman in her constitutional form. Last week we dove very deep into Bhu Shakti, the feminine energy, and very much went into her constitutional form. And so she needs to be protected by the king. But Prithu Maharaj, he's arguing. So Prithu Maharaj, he's such a king. He's empowered. He's Shaktivesh avatar. If he wants to, he would be able to perform this duty of killing. because he is completely empowered by the Lord and he knows what is actually Dharma. So take it to the present day. These politicians and governors and senators, they're not qualified to have certain powers. But hearing this verse in purport, we can actually understand what's being spoken, right? Somebody who's Atma Sambhavana, they're completely mad with they're only interested in their own self-maintenance. They have no mercy and compassion for others. They're going to cause a disturbance to society. Right? And we actually see how sometimes this is happening now. There's a lot of inequality in this world due to so many different reasons, karma, fate, what have you, but it's also because there's not proper regulations in society. We have a very much rampant neoliberal capitalism that doesn't always seem to favor everybody. We don't have to go into this sociological stuff so early in the morning. But the point is that somebody who has no mercy and compassion for others, they're going to create a disturbance. And so it's better to have them removed. But is this Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's way of doing things? Which is always an interesting point when reading certain aspects of Srimad Bhagavatam. We're reading a verse and purport where if we take it into context with our entire Gaudiya Vaishnav philosophy and theology, this is not the way of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We have the great mercy of our acharyas who've given us the pastimes and glories of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and even speaking to the second part of this purport, he personally came to give the Yuga Dharma, which is the chanting of the holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. By giving this Yuga Dharma, he's giving us an easy, simple way to purify our heart, to purify ourselves of this Atma Sambhavana. Right? In the material world, most living entities are interested in their own self-maintenance, self-preservation, because this is the mood of the world, dog eat dog world. Everybody's trying to climb to the top of the careers, to get so many resources so they can do whatever they want. And it's very, very much self-centered. But by chanting the holy names, just this easy Yuga Dharma, right? Before, in so many in so many different yugas, there were so many different types of dharmas, deity worship, very elaborate fire yagyas, fire sacrifices that were to be performed. But in this Kali Yuga, just by chanting the holy names, Chaito Darpana Marjanam Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam, when we take shelter of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Shikshastakam, it goes from purifying the heart and being relieved of the material anxieties all the way up to realizing Krishna Prema, pure love of God, so that we're completely free of self-centeredness. Right? The last verse talks about Krishna can do whatever he wants. He can neglect me. He can do whatever he wants, but he's the Lord of my life. So the self-centeredness By the time we get to the last verse of Shikshastika, where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is expounding the glories of this Nam Tattva, the truth of the holy name, and Nam Bhajan, the worship and performance of chanting the holy names, self-centeredness, interest in self-maintenance is completely washed away. Now, obviously, it takes a lot of time to really realize that deep within the heart, because life after life after life, it's been about self-preservation. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we see in his pastimes how merciful he is, right? In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 8, text 15, right? Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he talks to those who, if you're really into logic and you want to use your intelligence, okay, take that logic and take that intelligence and use it to try to understand the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chamatkar, you're going to be completely astonished at the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. So in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one day, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he told Lord Nityananda and Srila Haridas Thakur, who's Namacharya, he's the great teacher of the holy names. He says, go out and preach to everyone. Bolo Krishna, Bhajo Krishna, Koro Krishna Shiksha. Tell everyone to chant the holy names. Tell everyone to worship Krishna. Tell everyone the instructions of Krishna. Krishna is your father. Krishna is your mother. Krishna is the very life and soul of all living entities. Go out and tell everyone. And so they do. They go from house to house. They go all over the streets, telling everyone, Bolo Krishna, Bhajo Krishna, Koro Krishna Shiksha. And some people are responsive. They start chanting. Others are, oh, you know what? They're thieves. They're coming from they're going house to house to house to look and see what they can steal. They're imposters. Don't let them in. In so many ways, people are reacting differently to Lord Nityananda and Haridas Thakur. And they come to a marketplace. And what do they see? They see these two huge personalities, big. Why? Because they're constantly eating meat and drinking wine. Lord Nityananda, Haridas Thakur saw them, that these persons were so intoxicated with wine that sometimes they were speaking very humbly. Sometimes they were pulling each other's hair and beating each other up. And Lord Nityananda, he went and asked some people, who are these two persons? Oh, this is Madhavananda and Jagadananda. They were born in Brahmin family. But almost since their birth, they've been engaged in so many sinful activities. They've killed Brahmins. They've killed cows. They're constantly intoxicated. They've even burned people's houses down. But Vrindavan Das Thakur states one thing. He says that they never committed Vaishnav aparad. They never committed offense to a Vaishnav. And he says, why is this? They never had a chance to associate with the Vaishnavas because they were constantly associating with drunkards and other meat eaters. This is sometimes the mercy of Krishna, to not have certain people meet the Vaishnavas and criticize and create Vaishnav aparad. So Lord Nityananda, Haridas Thakur, they saw these two personalities, and Lord Nityananda said, if we can get them to chant the holy names, if we can get them to surrender to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will really be glorified as Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate. He'll be really glorified as the most merciful incarnation of God. So Lord Nityananda and Haridas Thakur, they went up to Jagai and Madhai. This is what they were known as. Jagadananda, short as Jagai. Madhavananda, short as Madhai. So Jagai and Madhai. They went up to him. Lord Nityananda, he said, Bolo Krishna, Bhaja Krishna, Kora Krishna Shiksha. Moment that Jagai and Madhai heard this, he said, who are these sannyasis? And they started chasing them to beat them. And they were chasing them. And Lord Nityananda and Haridas Thakur, they started running away. Some people, they were yelling, see, we told you not to go up to them. We told you to leave them alone. Some said, oh, get those imposters. And the pious Brahmins, they were chanting, please let them get away. Please let them get away. And Haridas Thakur and Lord Nityananda, they started joking as they were running away. Haridas Thakur said, I was just saved by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I was beaten in 22 marketplaces and Lord Chaitanya saved me. I became free. Now I'm going to be beaten up and killed by these two rogues. And Lord Nityananda said, you were so merciful to those personalities that were beating you, that you were praying for them, right? This is amazing Vaishnav mercy that Srila Haridas Thakur, when he was being beaten and beaten and beaten, all he was doing was praying for those who were beating him to be saved by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so Lord Nityananda, he said, just as you prayed for them, these two personalities will also be freed because of your praying for them. And they were laughing and joking and running away. And Jagai and Madhai, because they were so big from eating meat, they had a hard time running fast and they couldn't catch up. And so what did they do? They just started beating each other up because they were just so intoxicated that they wanted to beat something. So Haridas Thakur and Lord Nityananda, they went back to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Every day they would come back to where all the devotees were gathered with Lord Chaitanya and give a Sankirtan report of their daily preaching activities. And they brought up Jagai and Madhai. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he told Lord Nityananda that just by having your darshan, they've already become free. And Advaita Acharya, he heard from Haridas Thakur about Lord Nityananda. Lord Nityananda Prabhu, he's such an interesting personality, avadut, that sometimes he would jump into the Ganges River and he would wrestle with crocodiles. Sometimes he would go into a milk shed and he would steal some milk from a cow, and the farmer would come out and see Haridas Thakur and blame Haridas Thakur. Lord Nityananda Prabhu, he's intoxicated with divine madness of love of God. And his activities are actually inconceivable. But Haridas Thakur was talking to Advaita Acharya. So just as Jagai and Madhai, they're intoxicated on wine. So this other drunkard, Lord Nityananda, he's drunk on love of God. He's attracting other drunkards. And so the next day, Lord Nityananda, Haridas Thakur, they went out preaching again, telling everyone to chant the holy names, worship Krishna, teach others about Krishna's instructions. They saw Jagai and Madhai. Lord Nityananda went up and they said, what is your name? He said, Avadut. And as Lord Nityananda was about to preach to them, Madhai, hearing this name, Avadut, he took up a clay pot and he smashed the face of Lord Nityananda, and transcendental blood was coming down. He took up another clay pot. He was going to smash it again. Jagai reached out and grabbed the arm of Madhai and said, how can you be so cruel? He's an outsider. How can you be so cruel to a person like this. Other devotees, they had went and told Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu what had happened. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ran to the scene and he started shouting, "Chakra, chakra, chakra." Jagai and Madhai and other devotees saw the Sudarshan chakra, the weapon of Lord Vishnu that manifests to cut off the heads of the demons, and he was about to cut off the heads of Jagai and Madhai. Lord Nityananda stopped Lord Chaitanya and he said, "Jagai saved me." Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his mood immediately turned to Jagai. He embraced Jagai. And he said, "Today you have saved Lord Nityananda Prabhu. Because you've saved Lord Nityananda Prabhu, I bestow upon you Krishna Prema." And as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said this to Jagai, immediately Jagai fell unconscious in ecstasy of experiencing ecstatic love. Madhai saw all of this. And due to interest in self-maintenance, he was saying, well, he gets ecstatic love. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Lord Nityananda Prabhu's body is more dear than my own. The only way that you can be saved is if Lord Nityananda Prabhu gives you his mercy. Madhai fell at the feet of Lord Nityananda. He saw what had happened to his brother, Jagai. So he fell at the feet of Lord Nityananda, and Lord Nityananda embraced him. So to see how the Lord Nityananda and Haridas Thakur are showing us extreme examples of mercy and compassion for those who are harming them. They still have compassion and mercy in extreme examples. And Madhai, having taken shelter of Lord Nityananda and Lord Nityananda forgiving him, he was also bestowed Krishna Prema. Now both of them, Jagai and Madhai, they were brought back and there was a huge kirtan. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he said, Jagai and Madhai, they've committed uncountable sinful activities. But today, having taken shelter of this Vaishnav Dharma, you will see all of their sins leave. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who has a beautiful Radha Bhava Duti, Suvalitam Krishna, his body is beautifully golden with a luster of gold. And as he took on all of the sinful activities of Jagai and Madhai, his body turned blackish. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu turned to Advaita Acharya and said, who do I look like? And Advaita Acharya said, you look like Shama Sundar, Krishna himself. And Lord Chaitanya said, chant the holy names louder and louder. And this huge kirtan was started and everyone was dancing. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's bodily hue returned back to brilliant golden. And he said that anyone who criticizes the Vaishnavas or commits Vaishnav aparad, offenses to devotees, all of these sinful activities will enter into the heart of that person. This is why there's such deep instructions on Vaishnav etiquette and how to behave with other Vaishnavas so that there's no Vaishnav aparad. And seeing how Jagai and Madhai became pure devotees. So here we're hearing about how those who are only interested in their personal maintenance and have no compassion for other living entities may be killed by the king. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and this is pointed out by Srila Prabhupada, the whole world is filled with Jagais and Madhais. That in this day and age, everyone is interested in their own self-maintenance. And there's so many people who are doing activities that are against mercy and against compassion, the Lord would have to kill everybody, because the material atmosphere is filled with people who are mad in ego and who have no mercy. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and this is why it's so important for us to balance statements in Srimad Bhagavatam with those statements and pastimes in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not kill Jagai and Madhai. Instead, he reformed them to become devotees. And we see how even Yamaraj, he saw Jagai and Madhai being turned into Vaishnavas. And there's such kirtan that Yamaraj, he went to Chitragupta. Chitragupta, he is the scribe for Yamaraj, and he writes down, he keeps track in order of all of the activities that people perform. He's empowered by Yamaraj. All those sinful activities, they were written down. And Yamaraj asked Chitragupta, oh, how many sinful activities did Jagai and Madhai perform? He said, we have millions and millions of documents stacked up about them. And in one moment, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took all of those sinful activities away. And this is the power of the holy name also. The power of the holy name is able to wipe out all sinful activities. Although we don't want to use that as an excuse to perform other sinful activities. Nam no balad yasahi papabud here. Na vidyate tasya yamarhi shudahi. This is the seventh offense to chanting the holy names, to perform sinful activities on the strength of the holy names, thinking that, oh, I'll perform sinful activities and then I'll just wash them all away. This is actually namaparad, an offense against the holy name, which is non-different than Krishna. But Yamaraj, Chitragupta, they were so astonished at the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that all these sinful activities, they were immediately wiped away. And Yamaraj saw the kirtan of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with Jagai and Madhai, and on his chariot, he fell unconscious. And actually at this time, other demigods, Brahma, Indra, Shiva, they saw how Yamaraj had fallen unconscious in ecstasy, seeing the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They all went around Yamaraj, and Yamaraj got up and started chanting the holy names. And there was this kirtan of the demigods, Lord Indra, who has eyes all over his body, right? He was chanting the holy names, and every one of those eyes, hundreds of eyes, they were all crying in ecstasy, and the Brahmin's curse had reached its perfection because these tears were able to come out of his hundreds of eyes, and he started rolling on the ground in ecstasy. Lord Shiva, naked, was dancing around wildly, shouting the holy names of Krishna. Brahma and all the demigods, they saw the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so going into the next part of the purport, that as far as the field of spiritual activities is concerned, when a devotee is self-satisfied and does not preach the glories of Krishna, he is not considered a first-class devotee. A devotee who tries to preach, who has compassion upon innocent persons who have no knowledge of Krishna, is a superior devotee. And so Srila Prabhupada would bring up two terms in this regard, the Bhajananandi and the Goshtianandi. The Bhajananandi is one who is a devotee and is very great personality, right? They're taking shelter of the holy names and they're taking shelter of Krishna consciousness, but there's not a real push to go out and preach. They're very much secluded. And the Goshtianandis, when we hear this term Goshti, Goshti has meanings in Sanskrit, like assembly and also family. So when you look up the term Ishta-goshti, and Srila Prabhupada would use this term Ishta-goshti. Ishta means Ishtadev, our worshipable deity, and Goshti means to be an assembly and have discussions about the Ishtadev. And when you look up Ishtagoshti in Vedabase, actually Srila Prabhupada refers to the Srimad Bhagavatam class as being Ishtagoshti, where even we assemble and we hear about our Ishtadev Krishna. So this is Ishtagoshti. And Goshti meaning family also. Goshti Anandi means one who takes pleasure, Anandi. He's getting pleasure from telling the assembly and telling the family about Krishna. The Bhajan Anandi is getting very much a lot of bliss in their own bhajan, their own worship. And so we have first class devotee and those who are not considered first class. And Prahlad Maharaj, he is very much Goshti Anandi. He, in his prayers to Lord Nrsingadev, he says, "My dear Lord Nrsingadev, I see that there are many saintly persons indeed, but they are interested only in their own deliverance. Not caring for the big cities and towns, they go to the Himalayas or the forest to meditate with vows of silence, monavrata. They're not interested in delivering others. As for me, however, I do not wish to be liberated alone, leaving aside all these poor fools and rascals. I know that without Krishna consciousness, without taking shelter of your lotus feet, one cannot be happy. Therefore, I wish to bring them back to shelter at your lotus feet." So this goes back to even Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission is to spread the Sankirtan movement and help everyone actually become happy. And so many people want to be happy. And actually, those who are actually self-interested, the highest self-interest would be to engage in Krishna consciousness. And in a mature understanding, we can also see that different devotees go through different stages of Bhajan Anandi and Goshti Anandi. So we can see how sometimes somebody might be a Bhajan Anandi. They're very much engaged in their own worship. And sometimes this might be good for them because then later on they'll become a proper Goshti Anandi. And we even see how sometimes Goshti Anandis can become Bhajan Anandis in different ways of their preaching. And so we have to also have a balanced view, because sometimes, and not to get too political about this, or just to point this out, that we do see sometimes how sometimes people want to be a Goshti Anandi, they want to be a big preacher, but they might not be qualified to be a big preacher right away. And what might happen is that they, being a big preacher, they might have people gather around them, but because they're not qualified and they don't have the proper sadachar, they might perform activities and even fall from that position. And then because of their status, they might have other people lose faith that have faith in them, and it causes a big disaster. And so we have to see how even Srila Prabhupada and our Vaishnavacharyas, even while they were preaching, they still had such deep bhajan, they had deep worship. We see Srila Prabhupada, when he went to Vrindavan, he was writing back to Godhead. Amazing. He was still preaching. But at this point, he was also very much deep within bhajan and preparing to come to the West. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his vow of chanting 1,000,000,000 names. He externally seemed like he was Bhajananandi, but inside he still had that deep resolve to establish a movement that would take Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings eventually all over the world. And through Srila Prabhupada, this was realized. So we also have to be quite mature in our understanding that sometimes we might have to go a little bit within so that we can have deep realizations to then go without and to help others and really help the assembly and the family of the human world. And Prahlad Maharaj, this prayer is quoted again and again by Srila Prabhupada. So to develop that is something very deep, because also if a person is not interested in others' welfare, he should be considered to be condemned by the personality of Godhead or his incarnation like Prithu Maharaj. So if we have a great gift, if we have Krishna consciousness within our life, we do want to share that with others. This is actually what prachar means. And prachar, some take it to be meaning to be preaching, right? Sometimes it's just translated as preaching. And preaching can have a very negative connotation to it, right? Nobody wants to hear from somebody who thinks they're holier than thou and I'm preaching to you and pointing fingers in your face. But actually, this prachar is sharing. So from our own personal worship and our bhajan, our chanting of the holy names, and we're hearing the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, or we're hearing the pastimes of Krishna, prachar literally means to share. We're having deep realizations and we shouldn't keep them to ourselves. We should share with others in a sharing mood. Oh, listen to what I heard today. It's so amazing. And then to also hear, oh, what did you read today? What is your realizations today? And then you get this very beautiful machita madgana pranaya bodhiantas chitta that the devotees are relishing, hearing and sharing about Krishna. And that's what the Ishtagoshti is all about, hearing and sharing. I was hearing Srila Prabhupada Srimad Bhagavatam class yesterday about how hearing, you can hear, but you also have to chant. And so this hearing, and this is one of the, actually also the signs of love between Vaishnavas, revealing the mind and listening to others reveal their mind. And so to develop that spiritual life where we want to have mercy, we want to have compassion, and we should see how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the incarnation of mercy and compassion, so that if there's people who are only interested in their personal maintenance and they have no compassion, like Jagai and Madhai, they can be reformed through the holy names, through the chanting of the holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So stop here if there's any questions or comments, realizations.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much. So you're talking about how there's different phases of our life in terms of maybe preaching and going more within. Can you say something about your own experience of that and how it, really helps both? Helps your bhajan, helps your preaching, to take the time to do both.
I'm sorry, I missed the.
In other words, how can you say something from your own experience of, going more within for a time and sharing, like you're saying, without? And how has that worked for you?
Hmm, Krishna. Yeah. Yeah. I I kind of feel that, yeah, in my life, when I look at, it's going to be, it's over 20 years of trying to practice Krishna consciousness now. And I can kind of see in my youth where, being in LA and under Svavas Prabhu, there's such a, real preaching spirit to really get out there and do Harinam. I mean, when I joined the ashram in LA under the guidance of Bhakti Tirtha Nanda Maharaj, um, we were going out on Harinam every night except for Sunday. I mean, we had like a full day of just service and reading, and then every night at 5 o'clock to 8 p.m. we would go for Harinam on the Third Street Promenade in LA, and it was really ecstatic. I mean, it was to do Harinam every single night like that, and to give it your all. But then, sometimes you would feel like, I'm not reading enough. I'm not, I feel like I'm not going deeper. And when you would go to Svavas Prabhu, even though he had this like real, like, get out there and preaching mentality, he'd be like, okay, just take some time off, chant, read, but do service. That's part of the process, is not just to like kind of intellectualize Krishna consciousness, but also to perform practical service, to realize what you're reading and hearing. And so, in so many different, I could, see how Svavas Prabhu and different leaders in ISKCON, they really want people to be Krishna conscious, right? And Narendra Prabhu, he would always bring up this point that when uh, book distributors, he was there, and there was a group of book distributors, and they were with Srila Prabhupada, and he asked a question at the end that, what pleases you most, Srila Prabhupada? And all of the people that were there who were book distributors, they were thinking, oh, Prabhupada's going to say book distribution. He said, what pleases me the most is that if you love Krishna. And they're like, oh, so I kind of find that, going deeper into the philosophy, going deeper into our own bhajan, we have deep realizations where we can actually give those deep realizations to others. And at the same time, to not neglect the preaching. So sometimes we can be in a neophyte stage and think like, oh, I'm going out, I'm doing this, and I'm helping, and you can not be having very deep realizations, and so you might not be helping people in a real deep, in a deep way. And I kind of, I've seen that within myself, and I've seen that with others, where somebody who really comes to you for guidance, and then you're not really able to guide them properly because of not really deeply understanding the Siddhanta and having your own realizations. So yeah, it goes hand in hand, and to, and how Srila Prabhupada would bring this up, book distributors going out and preaching, but are they reading the books? And so yeah, to have that really, to go together, yeah, it's a very, very deep thing. And to see your example also, and how you have a very deep bhajan. And if you could say something on this also, I'm sure you have very deep realizations about this, so doing it for so long.
Thanks, Prabhu. That was very nice. I was just thinking how Prabhupada would say that, the purity of the chanters on the Harinam party is important for the, listeners and people to receive the holy names in a pure way, that it would benefit them. So, yeah, there's a motivation there for all the devotees to become purified so that, well, of course, they need to fly their own plane, but especially in this mission to be able to help the people more and, help them in Krishna consciousness by more pure presentation. So seems to be like a natural impetus or push that comes in time that we need to do this, for everyone's welfare. So thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Any other comments or questions?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Oh, thank you for the class. I was just wondering if you can give, like, what are some of the ways one can apply knowledge of the philosophy in real life situations, for inspiration, problem solving, or character development, and so on. What are some of the practical ways that you can give to show how we can translate that knowledge of the philosophy to real life situations, the application of it? Thank you.
In terms of like general practice or the
Like real life situations, interaction with people in one's personal life or professional life or family life.
So taking the philosophy and practically, I was kind of, a realization that I had recently where it's, especially bringing up, you brought up family life, to see my wife and daughter as devotees. And I think that's, not to go too personal or anything like that, but just to, familiarity breeds contempt. And I was really focusing on the other day on how, reading certain Vaishnav literatures about Vaishnav etiquette, how we talk to each other, how we behave with each other. And then with family members, that can kind of go to the wayside because there's such familiarity there. And not to like make it impersonal and, there's not kind of like affection or anything there, but to realize, and that's part of it is, gyan and vigyan. So we have the philosophy and we read about, even Prahlad Maharaj's prayer. We have so much philosophy, but vigyan is how to then realize that. And I think that's kind of what you're asking is, to realize that. So, and I think that was kind of like what Sami Prabhu was talking about yesterday with fanatical devotees or Kanishta devotees, is that they might even have the philosophy down, but they're not able to practically engage that philosophy in their daily lives. So even the, practical philosophy of, we're not this body. So there's the theoretical idea that I'm not this body, but then in our day-to-day life of, are we realizing that? And that comes with activities. So what are my activities? Am I engaging in sense gratification? Am I engaging in following the four regular principles? Am I using my body to engage in devotional service? So that would be a practical way of taking that philosophy of we're not this body and then engaging that body in Krishna's service. So then even today, bringing it home to, again, are we, we hear how we shouldn't be self-centered and we should have compassion. And how are we manifesting that in our day-to-day life? Are we just being kind to other people, especially those who are ignorant, right? And that's another realization, is that we're not going to, we hear about a verse like this: oh, people are self-centered, people have no compassion, oh, we should just do away with those people. No, that's not the philosophy that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is bringing. Where is our compassion? Where is our mercy? But then also how to practically demonstrate that. And that's why Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur coined this term, amando daya daya. That mercy, which isn't going to give any negative reaction, which is Krishna consciousness. So there's a lot of different ways on how to take the philosophy and then put it in our daily practice. And that's why Vaishnava etiquette is so important, to really understand Vaishnava etiquette, and also etiquette for those who are not devotees, right? Because even Vrindavan Das Thakur and acharyas have sometimes stated that to criticize others is sometimes worse than meat eating, right? Criticizing others, you're building a bridge, and whatever you're criticizing others about, that actually manifests within your heart, and you're connecting with that, and you're building a bridge. And so, yeah, in so many ways, it's that gyan and vigyan. To first, we have to know. We do have to theoretically know the philosophy, but then how are we going to practically take that into our lives as vigyan, realization? And so that comes from, as we just talked about with Mother Nidra, how, to like really go deep and realize that. Would you like to say anything on this point?
I appreciate your examples and elaborations, Prabhu. I like how you said, like, we might know the philosophy, but it becomes alive when we engage in devotional service and practice our sadhana. It's more accessible. We can draw from it more easily, and then about our own character, practice what you preach, give a good example. That way it makes even a better impression on people to inspire them more also. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
All right. It's 9:05. If there's any other maybe last question or comment, otherwise we can stop here. All right. Thank you for your kind attention. Forgive any offenses. If I said anything right, it's by the mercy of Shishiguru and Gauranga. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna.